All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Um, Welcome to this breakout session. We're going to talk about universal design for learning as a framework to reach all students in your courses. Just a little background about me. I am Carol Willard. I teach in the curriculum and instruction department. Um, my life has been in special education. I'm a special education teacher. I was a special ed teacher in public schools for a long time, and now I teach in our graduate program and our undergraduate program, preparing teachers, both in special education and general education. So UDL is something that is, that's the abbreviation for Universal Design for Learning, but that's something that is very near and dear to my heart, and we talk about this a lot in education, and I'm happy to share some ideas with you today around universal design for learning. All right, so I'm going to switch gears for just a couple minutes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a dinner party. And I want to invite all of you to a dinner party at my house. And I have an idea of what I want to make for dinner, but I'm wondering what you would like for dinner. So I'm going to ask you to go to the link that's in the chat box for the Jamboard. Let me say that the first link is a link to all of the slides that I'll be talking about today. So if you wanted to have a side-by-side copy, you can access that. But the second link is to a Jamboard, which is a way for you to do some collaboration to work together. If you go to the Jamboard, you will see my dinner party plate, right? And if you scroll over to the sticky note, you can click on that and you can write a sticky note on yourself, create a sticky note for yourself. And I'd like you to create just a sticky note telling me what you would like to eat at our dinner party. Oh, who's that Buffalo Bills fan? I'm a Bills fan myself. So pizza and a Buffalo Bills win. I'm right up that alley, some fresh salad. Oh, grilled oysters. I love that you're a Bills fan. Not so sure about the grilled oysters. Wait a minute. More pizza, comfort food. Wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. I have an idea. Roast chicken, broccoli, and rice. Wait a minute. Okay, this is gonna be tough because I'm gonna have to keep running back to the kitchen to keep making some chicken and then some broccoli. And then, of course, you gotta have those chicken wings hot. So I'm gonna have to get some extra hot sauce. Salmon, not so sure about how to do that. Okay, well, okay, so, all right. What are we gonna do about this? I have an idea of what I wanna have for dinner. I was gonna sit down and have beef stew with some bread for my dinner, but now I'm thinking now I got to do salad, rice and salmon, jello, chickpeas, steak, baked potatoes, fried plantains, pork. Okay, I'm gonna have to keep running back and forth, but I can probably do it. I won't get to see you very much, but oh boy. Okay, stop with the ideas. Enough. Chocolate cake. That should maybe be the main course. This is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem at my dinner party because I'm going to have to keep running back and forth and sort of doing sort of this makeshift meal while I'm trying to entertain or talk to all of my dinner guests. This is problematic. This is a real problem. Okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit and what this has to do with UDL. The point I'm trying to make here is if you plan something, you've got to plan for a range of eaters when you have a dinner party. So maybe rather than having a sit-down dinner, it would be better if I had a buffet so people had choices of what they wanted to eat. And everybody could, if my main objective of the dinner party is to make sure that everybody has a good meal and we have good conversation, then a buffet might be the way to go, right? And I could have chicken and pork and some buffalo wings and some chocolate cake and pizza and different things. And plus, I would be thinking about that beforehand. So I could be really thoughtful about how I would prepare those different entrees or how I might prepare those different food items on the buffet. That's the framework I want you to think about when we talk about UDL. It's about having choices for the students in our classes. And it's about being thoughtful about those choices and not making up for it as I'm teaching the course and retrofitting things as I'm teaching the course, or after I give an assignment and I think, oh, wait, I have somebody who would really do better with this sort of presentation mode, or I have a student who really could show what they know if I gave them this option. But if in my planning for the course, I think about providing flexible options from the beginning, it's going to save me a lot of effort, and it's going to help the students reach the learning outcomes that I intend for them. And so keeping that buffet in mind, we're going to talk about UDL as a framework for thinking about our students and how to plan our courses. So the question that's going to be driving what we're talking about today is, how can we make our instruction more effective for all of our students? What modifications or changes or revisions can we make in the assignments that we plan and the learning activities that we plan in class so that all of our students can feel like they are a part of the class, that they are contributing members, and that they're learning what they should be learning, that they're able to meet those high expectations that we have for them? We know that the context of education is changing. We know that we have increased diversity in our class. You can see on the slide where it says that there's an emphasis now on standards and teacher accountability or professor accountability. We have the expectation that we are going to plan a course that our students will all reasonably able to reach our academic targets. So we really have to plan with that range in mind now, and we really have to be thinking about a comprehensive way to address all of those learner needs with our class activities, our assignments, our assessments. Again, UDL is a way to do that, a way to think about that. So there is a bit of research out there on UDL. Again, UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning. It is an approach that supports instruction in responding to student challenges. It's about incorporating principles of UDL to optimize our teaching and the learning for all of our students. It is determined, I don't want to say determined, but generally there's research that supports UDL and about having a flexible design. So there's some scientific insights into how humans learn that helps inform UDL practices. It's not just one solution, but really a set of strategies that instructors can use to support a range of learners. It's effective for students with disabilities as well as all the other students in your class. And it's designed to support all students without adding the stigma of students having to self-identify as a potentially struggling student. And so that's really important because we know that students are less likely to come to a professor, especially in higher ed, and share their struggles that they're having. So if we can design options in our class so we can support all of our learners, that's going to be beneficial for those learners. It can alleviate a number of problems that our students might have in our class. Challenges with reading difficulties like learning new vocabulary, retention of what is read, connecting prior learning to new concepts that we're talking about. UDL approaches can help with writing difficulties because UDL practices can help identify core ideas and help to structure the content so that students can organize their thoughts and make assertions. It can help students use feedback effectively to improve their writing. UDL approaches can also help with students who have struggles with researching because it can help students with executive functioning skills or prioritizing, organizing, and creating a timeline. And again, I can't stress this enough that UDL really supports all learners to achieve more. Some of the assumptions of UDL is that we have a range of learners in our class. Whether you have students who have self-identified as having a disability or not, there are a range of learners in our classes and learner differences. Another assumption of UDL is that curriculum should be presented flexibly. So we have the content, but we want to provide alternative ways that students can think about that content. The goal is really to engage and support all of the learners in our class. We want to certainly consider how we're assessing students and and how they can show us what what they now know with their new understandings. So practices around assessment are a strong part of UDL, whether it's a summative assessment or formative assessments. And UDL is inclusive by design because we're thinking about that range of learners. It's going to include all of our learners. So to reiterate, UDL is about building flexibility at each point in the lesson, both in terms of input and how the students process the information and the end product that they come up with. It's about providing options. It's about maximizing student learning. And it also makes use of evolving technologies. Certainly with our pivot over the last several months, we've learned a great deal about emerging educational technologies, and UDL has always taken advantage of those technologies and implemented or incorporated those in a UDL framework. So how do we as college instructors then use UDL in our teaching? I want you to think about and maybe jot down on a piece of paper that you have nearby, 1 or 2 big assignments or class activities in your class that you want to improve. Maybe you thought it was going to go a certain way. Maybe you thought students were going to have a certain outcome, but they didn't quite meet the mark. Or as you were implementing or making this assignment, you're thinking, this just didn't hit it quite. So think about 1 or 2 assignments, and I'm going to ask you to keep coming back to this assignment or this learning activity a couple times during my presentation, just so that we can kind of keep this real for you, right? And you can think about how you might think about this assignment and shape this assignment in a new way using some of these principles from UDL. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can jot down that assignment or learning activity, whatever it might be. Okay, so everybody has an assignment or a task that you use in your class that you're thinking about how you might want to reshape that using some principles of UDL. So I'm going to show you a short video that was produced by the Boston College Center for Teaching Excellence. That's just going to give you a little introductory piece about some of the key principles of UDL. And hang on for 1 second. Got 2 screens going and they're not cooperating. Okay. So I have my video showing.
This presentation is about universal design for learning.
Give me a thumbs up if everybody can hear that okay? And you can see it? Okay, great. Let me close this up. Hang on a second.
And how it might inform your teaching. Deciding on teaching methods can be complicated, particularly as the students in your classroom bring a wide variety of unique strengths, interests, and needs that can help or hinder their learning. So how can you teach a course that seeks to meet each student's individual needs? That's what Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is all about. Principles for curriculum development that give all individuals equal opportunity to learn. So what does UDL look like in the classroom? First, begin with your student learning goals. What is it that you want students to be able to do as a result of having taken your course? After you determine those, UDL asks you to consider 3 areas of learning and instruction and how you might make them accessible to the widest possible audience. In representation, consider how course content is presented to the student. In expression, consider how the student is being asked to demonstrate their learning and apply it in new contexts. In engagement, consider strategies that make the most of student motivation to learn.
Well, just so you know, your video is not playing, only the
Let's
sound.
look at representation complicated, particularly as the students in your classroom bring a wide variety of unique strengths, interests, and needs that can help or hinder their learning. So how can you teach a course that seeks to meet each student's individual needs? That's what Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is all about. Principles for curriculum development that give all individuals equal opportunity to learn. So what does UDL look like in the classroom? First, begin with your student learning goals. What is it that you want students to be able to do as a result of having taken your course? After you determine those, UDL asks you to consider 3 areas of learning and instruction and how you might make them accessible to the widest possible audience. In representation, consider how course content is presented to the student. In expression, consider how the student is being asked to demonstrate their learning and apply it in new contexts. In engagement, consider strategies that make the most of student motivation to learn. Let's look at representation.
All right, I'm going to stop right there because we're going to be talking about representation, engagement, and action and expression through our discussion today. So come back over here to my main screen. All right, you should be back to my PowerPoint. Yes. All right. Excellent. So the critical access points when we're thinking about universal design for learning is engagement. That's really the why, that's the emotional attachment. And we want to connect the students emotionally to the content that we're talking about, what we're doing in class, so that they are more engaged and they're more motivated to learn. Representation part of UDL is really about how we present the content. And we want to be flexible in how we present the content so the students have different opportunities to learn about the content and connect with their prior understandings and to understand different perspectives around that content. And action and expression is really the how. How are students going to engage with the content? How are they going to manipulate those ideas? How are they going to show what they know or share their new understandings? So linked here on the PowerPoint is the UDL guidelines graphic. I'm guessing that I'm going to have to stop my share and reshare this. And you should see this chart. This is a graphic organizer, or what CAST calls a graphic organizer, that talks about engagement, representation, and action and expression. When you really dig into UDL and take a deep dive on the research around UDL, there is some discussion about, hang on a second, I stopped because my PowerPoint just died, but I'll come back to that. They talk about activating different parts of the brain. So the multiple means of engagement activates the affective networks in your brain. The providing multiple means of representation activates the recognition networks in your brain, and the providing multiple means of action and expression activates these strategic networks in your brain. I'm going to talk less about the neuroscience around there because it's a little bit of a fuzzy science, really. But what's most important, and I think what's most directly applicable to what we want to talk about, is what does all this mean about multiple means of engagement, representation, and action expression? What can I do in my class to help with this? So if you'll just hang on for 1 second because my PowerPoint crashed. So I'm going to reload that. And so can you see my PowerPoint that says it has a picture of somebody with their fingers on the keyboard?
No, you need to redo your screen share.
I did do that. Okay, let me try that again. Okay, how's that look?
We can see it.
All right, excellent, thank you. I think I won't be flipping around too much to outside. I'll trust that you'll be able to link to those outside links. All right, so multiple forms of engagement. This is really options for motivating students and sustaining effort and maintaining interest. So we want to provide options for self-regulation, self-assessment, and reflection. So it's really not just reflection, how was this assignment for you, but a reflection with guiding questions. And I think it's important to note that when we provide opportunities for our students to reflect, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to grade that or look at that, but just give students that opportunity to do that reflection, which will lead to better self-regulation and self-assessment. We want to provide opportunities and options for sustaining effort and persistence. So we want to foster collaboration in communities. So we might think about doing things like a partner interview or a think, pair, share, or having peers review projects. This helps to develop a community in our classroom. And we also want to provide options for recruiting interest by giving options and choices. So for example, in one of my classes, my students have to interview somebody with a disability, and then they can present what they've learned in whatever format they want. So some of the different things that students have done include writing a poem. I had one student who interviewed a person with a disability who loved hamburgers. And so she made this hamburger visual. And as she took out pieces of the hamburger, she talked about different aspects of this person that she interviewed, really noting that, that the person isn't defined just by their disability. Somebody else chose to do a watercolor. We had somebody create sort of like a garden, posters. We've had videos. So the idea is that by giving students choices on how they could present what they've learned, they were really invested in the assignment and really learned a lot from it. If you click on this more info, this links to an outside site. It's called UDL on Campus, and it really focuses on how you can apply concepts of universal design to higher education. And there's a number of case studies in criminal justice, education. I think there's an example from psychology, where professors have really taken the principles of UDL and they give you examples of how they've done it in their class. So traditionally, when we would engage students, we might think about providing a lecture. When we think about how we could shift that a little bit, when we're using a UDL framework, we would provide class discussions and group work. We might show a PowerPoint traditionally in class, but a UDL framework would say we make that PowerPoint available before the class begins. So students could either preview the content or they can take notes on your PowerPoint slides as you're talking about that. You could also consider providing PowerPoints with narration, even though you might be using the same PowerPoint in class without narration. While you're preparing for class, you might narrate the PowerPoint for students to refer to later. That would help with engagement. Traditionally, we might give only a grade in an assignment, but if we use a UDL framework, we would provide feedback on that assignment, not just a grade of an A, B, C or a 95, 85, but provide some feedback and pointers for students to improve their work. Traditionally, we might have little or no interaction among students in the class, but when we think about a UDL design class, we would provide opportunities for students to interact with each other on the class topic. So that might be small groups working together, partners working together, and this can be done outside of class also, right? So there's ways to think about how students might have to collaborate outside of class or collaborate inside of class that can keep the students engaged. And this can be effective even with a large group of students in a lecture hall format or a lot of people on a Zoom meeting through breakout rooms. So I asked you all to think about an assignment in one of your courses that you wanted to revise or tweak a bit. So thinking about multiple forms of engagement, jot some notes next to that assignment about ways that you might rethink how students engage with each other and stay motivated in order to be a part of the class, right? How you might improve engagement around that assignment. So I'm going to be quiet for just a couple seconds so that you can jot some ideas down. Okay, so finish up your thought. I just wanted to say one more thing about having PowerPoints available before class, or your Google slide deck available before class. Oftentimes when I talk about that, professors or teachers are concerned about if you provide the PowerPoint before class, then nobody's going to come to class. And I would say that my own experience and some research that I've read contradicts that when you provide the PowerPoint before class, in some ways it piques student interest. And there's ways to design that PowerPoint so that all of the information isn't on the PowerPoint, or that you leave certain almost like blanks in the PowerPoint so that students come to class so that they can fill in those missing pieces. But providing that structure to help students think about the content you're going to talk about in class, especially if you have a 3-hour class, can really help students who may struggle with prioritizing information or understanding what is the most important content that they've just learned about, maybe through some outside readings or preparing for that class session. Any thoughts or ideas about that, or any comments about that? You can feel free to jot something in the chat box or raise your hand, and Rebecca, you'll help me to see if somebody has put something in the chat box or raise their hand, okay? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Oops, hang on.
We had a comment in the chat box that says, I agree that it's better to provide slides before class.
Great, thank you, Jason. All right, so talking about the next access point in UDL is all kinds of technology, is multiple forms of representation. And this is options for maximizing comprehension and presenting content in a variety of ways. So it's really about preventing different ways that students can access the content, how you could highlight patterns or the big ideas. I used a Jamboard at the beginning of the class. That's one way to collaboratively kind of get everybody's ideas. You see that you can do that with a large group of people. A similar thing to use is Pear Deck, which you can use with Google Slides. It's sort of like an interactive poll that you can do. You can use graphic organizers or mind maps. I use Mind Map Free a lot in my class, where we start off with a general idea. And I sometimes do this in the beginning of class, like, here's one of the big ideas from the reading for today's class. Everybody just put an idea down that you think about when you recall that reading, and then connect with somebody else's ideas. And pretty quickly we have a nice mind map of some different ideas. And then in my course, when I'm talking about the class, or when I'm talking about the content in the class, I can pull from that mind map and say, okay, some people made this connection with some key ideas, and let's expand on that a little bit more. So having these collaborative opportunities to think together and see those big ideas can really let students see the content in a new way and understand different perspectives. We also want to provide options for language, mathematical expressions, and symbols. So an important way to do that, or one way to do that, is to provide simulations. As I said a couple seconds ago, I'm not going to link out onto the web because that seems to be messing up my PowerPoint a little bit, but this link on disability awareness is really a multimedia simulation on what it's like to have a disability. There's some first person perspectives, kids talking about school, going through school with this disability. There's somebody, a researcher, who talks about the disability. So it kind of gives a few different perspectives on that particular disability. PhET simulations for math and science provide interactive and colorful simulations, videos on different math and science concepts. And you can filter that by grade level, and there is a university grade level, so it is applicable for higher ed. Another option would be to provide closed captioning on all videos. So we think often of closed captioning only for those students who have a hearing impairment, but closed captioning can also help all of our students to get the content in that video one more way, right? So they can see it in words. I also would recommend that you make sure that your documents that you use in class are accessible for screen readers, whether it's a Microsoft product or a Google product or a PDF. And there's plenty of breakout sessions or plenty of resources for us here on our campus on how to make our instructional materials accessible. So I would encourage you to be sure that you do that. Not only is that important for students who may have reading difficulties to have a screen reader, but screen readers can also be helpful for students who maybe are driving a long distance in the car. So they're going to listen to a document or an article as opposed to having to read it with their eyes. So it's about providing multiple ways for students to access the content or learn about different perspectives.
Can I ask a question, Carol?
Sure, yes,
Sure.
please.
So how do you balance, like you mentioned, the simulations for math and science and options for mathematical expressions? So so there's an issue of accessibility, but I think also in the STEM, there's an issue of expectations or a canon that people begin to understand the notation used in a profession, whether it be physics or even economics, and translating ideas to mathematical notation for modeling and things like that. So I guess I'm curious, maybe there are other STEM instructors here, about how you balance that between the accessibility of a notation heavy equation versus really almost one of the shadow learning outcomes is to become comfortable with this notation of your profession.
Right, I think that's a great question, Liz, and thanks for asking that. I think that what's important is that we scaffold those expectations for students. So I think it depends on what type of a course you're teaching. Is it a 100 level course or a 400 level course? I think that definitely makes a difference. But I also think we want to provide that support for students. So if they need that support, we provide resources for students to maybe go outside of what we're talking about in class and have that support for themselves. Not all students are going to use that. I liken that to calculator use. Sometimes when we provide a calculator for students to do math problems in high school or elementary school, we might say, oh, we don't want them to use calculators because we want them to have math fluency. We want them to know the math facts. And yes, we do, but those students who learn math facts and are comfortable with math facts won't use the calculator because it'll be quicker and easier for them just to do the math facts on their own. But students who need the support of the calculator will use that calculator because they need that to be successful. So I think it's similar in this case where students will use that outside supports if they need it to understand. If they can't remember what this particular notation means, we provide that support so they can go back and look at that if they need to refresh their memory, so that over time, they very well may be learning that. And we want them to learn that notation, right? I want all of my special ed students to know what IEP stands for. But if they don't know it, then we have a glossary of terms that helps with those abbreviations that they can refer to if they need to. And Julie said, yes, it applies to music notation as well. And Rebecca said, yes, definitely. So I think it's important that we provide those supports, and the students who need those supports will use those supports. And as they become more comfortable with that notation or that language of the profession, they won't use those supports in the same degree. Does that answer your question, Liz?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hang on, I think we have another comment in the chat box. Yes, Zoe, I agree that sometimes students maybe are using different supports that we provide as a crutch, but that's part of our role as the instructor to help them self-assess, right? And to help them figure out what supports they need to be successful and when they can sort of fly on their own. So there is that balance there, absolutely. Some more ideas for multiple forms of representation would be to provide options for perception. So I certainly, during the first day of class or the first week of class, I talk about what my intro to special ed class is all about, and we have the syllabus and we have a list of learning outcomes. But I also provide a graphic representation of what we're doing so that those students who can see things visually or understand things that are represented this way a little bit more easily, it provides another way for them to access that content or understand the point that I'm making. So providing different ways to represent the same material is important. Another idea is to use digital textbooks, which I think can be very, very helpful. I love using a digital textbook. This is, again, from one of my intro to special ed classes. And what's nice about, I think about using digital textbooks is students can enlarge the print. They can they can have it read out loud to them. They can highlight, they can create flashcards, but I can also create links or thumbtacks in this case to different pieces that I want the students to remember. So the green thumbtacks are accessible to all of my students, and that's linked to a list of, in this case, related services and the role of different related service personnel in schools. The yellow thumbtacks that you see at the bottom are notes just for myself. So I remember to bring up a certain point in class. So using digital textbooks really gives us some flexibility that we wouldn't have with just using a paper copy textbook. So I think that that can be a really helpful way to provide multiple forms of representation in our class. And using different digital tools, like providing a recording of our classes and a transcription of our classes. So again, the students have both the visual and the auditory. They can read what was said in class. That can be really helpful. And right now when we're doing Zoom meetings, a lot of our classes are on Zoom. And if you record those and save those to the cloud, you can have an automatic transcription, which is pretty reliable. It's done pretty well, I believe, in my experience. And that's just another tool for students to access the content, right? Another way to represent the content that we're talking about. This link that I have is put out by CAST, and it provides some very explicit guidance on how to use different forms of media, like visual photographs or pictures in your class, and how you can make those accessible to all students, how you can use videos and make them accessible, how you can use podcasts and make those accessible. Again, multiple forms of representation of the content for our students. So traditionally, we might not provide classes materials before class, but if we're thinking about a UDL framework, we would provide those materials posted in advance on Blackboard. If I'm going to read an article in class or do any kind of reading in class, pass something out for students to read in class, I post it on Blackboard. So those students who know that they take a little bit longer to read or need to read things more than once will have access to that before class. I already talked a little bit about the e-textbook. Using connecting questions, something like the Jamboard or a poll on Zoom can be a way to start students thinking about the content and making connections. Using videos to build background knowledge, like newsreel videos or other types of videos can be helpful. And those are things that don't necessarily have to take out class time to do, but things that you can assign to the students to do before class on their own and come to class. It's a little bit of a modified flipped classroom model. And having guest lecturers certainly can help represent the content in a different way and certainly present a different perspective. Having students lead the discussion using case studies, these are all examples of ways to present the content in new and different ways, rather than just being the sage on the stage, as some say, being the only one, the instructor, the only one who can dispense of the content. So going back to that assignment or that activity that you thought about in the beginning of my presentation that I asked you that you want to be tweaking, think about some different ways that you might be able to represent the content. What are some new ways that you might bring in different perspectives? So I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can jot some ideas and think about what we've just talked about.
Carol, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you have an example of graphic syllabus that you were talking about in your previous slides?
I use a graphic representation to explain sort of the big picture of what my course is about. The whole syllabus, I still have a traditional syllabus in addition to that graphic representation. And if you go onto the UDL and higher ed, there are a number of syllabi that are exemplars on that website that show how you can design your syllabus with a UDL framework.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think there was another question. Okay, I'm going to come back to, Jason made a comment about the calculator and students with documented disabilities and documented accommodations. If I could just slide that over towards the end of my discussion, because I'm going to address that in just a couple of minutes. So moving on to our third access point for UDL is multiple forms of action and expression. So this is really about different ways for students to demonstrate their understandings. And a big part of this is providing opportunities for self-regulation for students to set goals for themselves and prioritize components. I think an important way to do this is to complete a project in stages. And so my students do a child study project that they really work on. I want them working on it for the whole semester. And so I have checkpoints where they have to turn in different pieces of that along the semester. That helps students stay focused, right? They know there's a big thing coming up at the end of the semester, but I'm going to force them and check in with them and give them feedback along the way so that that end project that they turn in at the end of the semester is more likely to meet the expectations that I have for them. You can also find some tools online that create a timeline for students and set deadlines for students, so they can look at their own schedule and say, oh wait, I have this big thing going on this weekend, so I need to get this done before that. Or so this research project calculator is a tool that they can use to sort of set goals for themselves. During our classes, especially when we get back to meeting face-to-face, or if you meet face-to-face this semester, providing options for physical action and different ways that students can respond. So you can do corner quizzes where students, if it's true or false, they move to different corners of the room, or if it's A, B, C, D, they move to different corners of the room. They get up and move. They get up and move and look at different posters that groups have created. Or even on a Zoom meeting, or if you have a large class and you don't really have the time or the space for large numbers of people to move around, you can use response cards. I've passed out red and green heavy paper, and students, if they agree, they hold up the green card. If they disagree, they hold up the red card, and it's a way for them to be involved, right? And there's some movement, they're engaged. There's a way for me to physically see what their understanding is, and I can go back and reteach if I need to. And certainly we can use digital tools to give students options to show them new understandings, providing options. So if what is the purpose of the assignment, knowing that purpose of the assignment, and then thinking about what are different ways that students might be able to show what they know. So I have students write different field reports, but the goal of that project or that assignment is really to make connections between what they're reading about in class and what they're seeing in their field placement classrooms. And so it's not really about writing. So why do they have to write it? I allow or give the option of audio recording or video recording their response to that prompt about the connections that they're making. So just really rethinking about what's the purpose of this assignment, and is there another way that students might be able to show what they know? There's some online tools for creating concept maps, using small groups to solve a problem or create collaborative documents like a Google Doc. That's something that you can easily look at. Also, if you have access, you have the students share that with you, and you can see in real time the students who are contributing to that. We also want to provide multiple tools for students to complete assignments at varied levels of support. So you can think about speech to text. So when students talk and the program will type out what they are saying, or text to speech, which is the reverse, which is like a screen reader. You can look at different accessibility tools that are built into Google suite of products and the Microsoft suite of products. You can use spelling and grammar checks like Grammarly to help students make sure that they express themselves in a way that other people can understand what they're writing. And as I said, providing a choice of format. And there's some more ideas right here that is provided through this link. I'm going a little bit fast because we're getting close to time. Here's some traditional and some universally designed ways to think about multiple forms of action and expression. I'm going to let you go ahead and read through that. It's really about giving students choices. And then I'm going to ask you to go back to that assignment that you wrote in the beginning. And what are some different ways that you can help students think about different ways to show what they know, with some different ways that they can express their new understandings? And Jason adds in the chat box that Mac has a lot of really useful features for accessibility. And I agree, absolutely. Okay, so you've had a couple opportunities to think about your assignment that you might be revising or tweaking for this semester. When I think about UDL, I wondered about a few things. Oops. So the principles of UDL are really around universal usability. It's not one size fits all. Flexibility is built in and it's not retrofitted afterwards. Think about that dinner party, right? Running back to that kitchen. That's not being flexible, right? We want to think about those range of options from the beginning. And we want to provide access and opportunities for all of our learners. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between accessibility and accommodations, and what does that have to do with UDL? Generally, accommodations like the use of a calculator or extended time on a test or extended time to do an assignment, those are accommodations that are specific to a student who has a documented disability. But by providing principles or applying principles of UDL, instructors can provide accessible and flexible options for all students to succeed. And it doesn't force students to disclose if they have learning needs, because disclosure can often be awkward. Students may be struggling students, but not necessarily have a documented disability. And it may be difficult for them to come to the professor and say, I'm really having a hard time understanding the reading. But if we build in supports to our class, into our class work, then they don't need to approach you, right? The onus isn't on them to access the content. The onus is on us to make sure our course content is flexible and accessible. And what does UDL have to do with student motivation? Students who have choices in their learning, which might change over the course of the semester, they're motivated to put in more effort. When they have a choice, when they have options, they have some skin in the game and they're invested and they're more likely to do better. So I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. I think we're right about at our ending time. Okay, we are at our ending time. Are there any questions, or if you have to go, thank you for attending. I'm just going to go forward a little bit. Here are some resources for professors. There are a lot of resources. These are two that I think are particularly helpful, that provide very specific exemplars for us to use. And here is a list of the references that I used in my discussion. And we have some resources here at SUNY Oswego. During these winter breakout sessions, we have drop-in accessibility office hours, which also will help you think about UDL. We have digital accessibility resources. That is a web page from SUNY Oswego that provides lots of tutorials and guidelines on how to make your materials accessible. And we also have the Accessibility Resources Department that provides resources for students with documented disabilities. And there are plenty of other breakout sessions that talk about accessibility. So I encourage you to attend all of those. I hope you didn't feel rushed at the end, but I'm happy to stick around for a couple more minutes before the next breakout session begins if you have a specific question that I can help you with, or you can feel free to email me, because I'll talk about UDL all day long, every day if I can, because it's one of my favorite topics, because I think it really does make a difference in our learning.